Welcome back to OpenLine. We are talking about college, metro high school students wanting to go to college, higher numbers actually enrolling in college, and then what happens 6 years out? How many of them actually graduate? New report is out saying we need to improve on those numbers. Happy to have with us a panel that knows all about it. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Reverend Fuzz. Reverend Fuzz, hello.
The president's entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts.
Reverend Fuzz, are you there?
Well, winning. He certainly knows the facts.
Let's come back to Reverend Fuzz. I don't know what, Reverend Fuzz, we want to hear from you. All right, but there's some areas where there were spikes, right? Some really good news areas. Yeah. And so let's talk about that. What are we seeing there?
Yeah. So when we look at 3-year college going rates, we saw Metro staying as a district about flat. But we saw some really interesting spikes in some of our low-income high schools, and we really attribute that to a coalescence of resources to help students understand that this was possible and to help navigate through the process.
Right. Some of our largest spikes were at some of our schools where we have the highest low-income student populations.
Well, that's really good to hear.
Right.
That more of them want to go to college.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for example, at Stratford High School on the east side, it was about 24% increase over a 3-year period.
And Whites Creek at 21%.
Yeah, so we had some massive massive increases, and so we wanted to look to see exactly what was happening there. And what we found, as Jennifer pointed out, is that you had this convergence of a number of different resources from across different stakeholder groups in the city. So you had nonprofits converging on them. You had state programs that were providing resources. Multiple different resources were coming together and working and aligned in such a way that students were getting more and more supports that they needed. So great philanthropy, for example, the Scarlett Family Foundation has done some great philanthropy work around providing supports to nonprofits to come in and provide services, so the Oasis Center, Martha O'Brien, where you saw them working in tandem with the leadership of the school, because that was so important to have the leadership of the school there working with them. That's where we saw the big spikes.
We also saw step up of some higher education institutions, and the Bridges from Belmont program that went deep in some of our high schools to help establish that college-going culture and give a pathway to students and 4-year scholarships to be able to go.
One of the interesting things we found out about Bridges to Belmont, and I had a conversation with Bob Fisher, president of Belmont, about this, was that all of the schools where we were seeing a higher increase than the metro schools average were places where Bridges to Belmont had put a program in.
Oh,
so
that's
they were
great.
all at the low-income high schools, and that was something that clearly was having an impact as well.
Shows the desire to want to go to college, which is positive, and the infrastructure to help kids fill out whatever paperwork or application they need to get into college.
So and prevent summer melt.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Let's try Reverend Fuzz. Are you there, Reverend Fuzz?
Yeah, I am. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Okay. Down through the years, I've worked with a lot of, young people going to college. And even right now, I'm thinking that we've got 8 to 12 boys who are in college that we're following and we send support to. And I'm going to focus on one. I was just talking to his mom this evening, to get some feedback on him. We've been dealing with him for a couple, 2.5 years now, but his dad, nobody in his family has been to college. See, Mama's a high school dropout and his sister dropped out, and he's raised by women. And while learning the whole, he graduates from Metro, and his dad, 20 years in jail and stuff. He graduates from a Metro school and he enrolls in college. My goodness. So, a college kid needs money, so, we do that. And his family never knew about a college loan, what you call that, like a student loan. He had needed money to get in school, and they had never heard that was an option. So they never been to school, and I was talking to him tonight, feedback. As long as he makes a 3-point grade average, we're going to back him up, okay? He better bring me a 3.0. And she told me about how he might have failed a test because he didn't have the $100 to open up a seal or something like that to take the test, whatever. But she said, but he's still encouraged and he believes in you. And do you hear any red flags? I mean, here's a kid who's he's the first from his family in these days and now that ever went to college, graduated from a metro school that operates at the bottom of the list. Wow, and he got in college. And he went there for 2 years, and now he's at a school here in Middle Tennessee going to college. And, you know, he's been there 3 years, but he probably got like 2.5 years of, you know, credit like you have. But is he going to finish? And what red flags you at? Because you gave me 24%. Now, I know my ratio is a lot better than that, but go on and talk to me if you will. Thanks for this show.
Reverend Fuzz, thank you.
Well, I'm going to just go out on a limb from personal experience and say that this young man has a really great chance of making it through because he has people who are walking along the way. And I think that our kids who are most at risk for not being able to get through are the ones who are having to try and navigate the road alone, which is one of the reasons why some of these programs like the Oasis offers and Martha O'Brien offers and some of our high schools are starting to build their own Escalara is helping kids walk all the way through and knowing how to connect them to resources at the university. Where they are.
And I was going to kind of segue right into that perfectly is that, and to Reverend Fuzz, I would say this, is that one of the things where we see students who are successful is that when they have great mentors and support from the community, when that support can figure out ways to hand off support to the colleges and universities and making sure that the student is connected into the support systems that are in place on the campus so that they can be successful. So if that student needs tutoring assistance, making sure that they understand where the learning resource centers are and to making sure that the student is taking advantage of those things because, believe it or not, the student is paying for it some way, whether they're using it or not. So I think that that would be the one thing that I would just say to Reverend Fuzz is to make sure that that student is taking advantage of the supports that are in place on campus because nobody does it themselves. And this young man obviously has a great support system in place for them at home. Now they got to make sure that that support system transfers to the institution.
It's great to hear the support system that it sounds like the church is giving this young man. And maybe people don't have it all the time at home, but here's a situation where the church is kind of helping and giving them that support, and that's great. And so how important is it, can it be quantified in this report, just to have some kind of support behind you, you know, people to help you navigate, people to ask you how did you do on that test or whatever it is, to have some sort of support system. How critical is that?
It's the critical component. One of the things that is pointed out in the report is that our school counseling system here is overwhelmed. And you're looking at student to counseling ratios of 450 to 1. And so, you know, even if you tried to have a personal conversation with one student a day, you couldn't get through your whole caseload, right? So in order for the schools have to rely on additional supports like local community-based organizations to help provide that same, to have those conversations to help students figure out and navigate the college world and all of the different forms that they have to fill out. It's so important, it's essential. You see places like Oasis Center, for example, where there's a number of mentors that work out in the schools, and they don't, you know, they might work across schools. They might be at this school one day and that school another day. But you have to have somebody there that can kind of have a little bit of the technical expertise to kind of help navigate through those complicated forms and ask the complicated questions about, you know, what their interests are.
It sounds like Reverend Fuzz was made a little nervous by some of the numbers, you know, about 6 years out, only this percentage is graduating.
Right.
But I'm encouraged that the student he's talking about has the kind of support that he has. So many of those other students we may be hearing about don't have that support. So I'm encouraged by that, as you said. You're encouraged by what?
I am, and I mean, and 6 years does seem like a long time, but I would say for first-generation college students, the path is not linear as we might. The path is not as linear as we might assume it to be, and so that even at the 6-year threshold, after that point, we do still see students that Bob has mentioned as stop outs, still completing and making it through. So I think that's
one of the things I'd like to, because I know Reverend Fuzz well. He's always been a big supporter of college access work, and I think this is something that's really optimistic to what's happening here right now. The Metro schools just received a $13.4 million federal Gear Up grant, and Gear Up is a program designed to provide college access services to students, and the funds for this will work over 10 middle schools, starting with 6th graders, and it will follow those students. The support and the resources follow the students all the way from the time that they're 6th graders into high school and into their first year of college. The middle schools will be covering kind of the predominantly low-income high school clusters, so you're looking at Pearl Cones and Stratford middle schools, and as well as on the southeast side in my community of Glencliff and Overton High School, some of those schools. Middle school students are going to be getting a lot of supports from a lot of different organizations, so that's something that's really positive.
So that's the Gear Up program. It's 10 middle schools, and they'll be following these students and making sure they have the support they need to. Right.
There's 10 nonprofit organizations, 4 colleges that are involved in the project, summer programs for kids. As they get older and they get into high school, they'll be simulating living on a college campus for a summer program. STEM initiatives, as well as a variety of other supports that are going to come into play.
And I think that what Gear Up offers us is like almost a roadmap for how we can change the culture, college-going culture in the city at large. That it does start in middle school, and it is going to take a cross-functional approach. Many different people at the table to connect across the continuum, which is sometimes siloed into K-12 and higher ed, but connecting those together for outcomes for students.
Right.
I like that, to change the college-going culture. Yeah, that's great. All right, we have to take a break. We'll take a break, come back, talk more about this. Be back right after this.